Hello and welcome to this edition of A Last Watch. As you can tell, my voice is a little different. I've been a little under the weather. I have a sinus infection or a head cold or something. I don't know. I've had it for about a week now. Hopefully, it's going to clear up. Uh, but anyway, this is my voice now, and will be for this episode. My wife said it sounds kind of sexy, so I don't always sound like this. If this is your first episode and you're like, "Oh, I like the way this guy sounds," it's not going to last. I hope. So I, I'm not going to be sounding like Barry White. I'm not going to be like, "Welcome to a Last Watch." Oh yeah, no, that's not going to happen. So anyway, I'm going to do the best I can with what I have here, um, and hopefully I'll get better. I've actually gotten better since last week. It hit me on a Monday, and by like Wednesday, I was down for the count. So I uh, I hope I feel better because I'm getting ready to take a little trip. But anyway, let's get into it. Today we're talking about the Mandela Effect, and that's something that almost everybody has either experienced or can at least relate to in some capacity. Um, and before we get into the main subject, I want to remind everybody that I'm going to be talking at the big conference in Broomfield, Colorado on May 24th. Come out and see me, and Jeff Meldrum's going to be there. This conference is put on by retired Navy SEAL Daniel Toth. If you go back a couple episodes, I interview him. We have a pretty lengthy discussion. He's going to be there. We're going to have a great time. He's probably going to be on the show again here before the conference here in the next few weeks. But forget the conference for a second. The real heart of the matter here is Beans is going to be in Colorado. So Beans, that's me, is going to get some In-N-Out burger. And I'll tell you guys a real quick funny story. When I found out that I was going to be going to Daniel's conference, to the big conference, I was like, oh yes, that's like Westish Coast, I can like get some In-N-Out. So I make my travel plans, and I'm like, all right, I got to find out like where the closest In-N-Out is. So I go to the In-N-Out website, and I look at their like locations map, and nothing pops up, and I'm kind of bummed because I was like, man, I was sure there was In-N-Out in Colorado. Like I thought for sure, like there's in Texas. Like I know they go as far east as Texas, so I was sure there were In-N-Outs in Colorado. But anyway, I was bummed. So a few days later, I'm talking to Lenny from the Poorly Made Police Memes podcast. He used to be a cop in Colorado. And I'm telling him about the conference, and I'm like, man, I'm disappointed. There's no In-N-Outs Colorado. And he's like, yeah, there are. There's several. And I was like, WTF. So I go back, I look at the website, and this time, instead of like looking at the map, I type in the search bar, like I type in Colorado, and several locations pop up, including, a couple like not far from where I'm going to be staying. So fix your website In-N-Out. I don't know. I'm disappointed, but I almost missed out. I mean, I'm sure I probably would have said something to somebody while I was there, and they would have probably like, no, there's like In-N-Out down the road, dude. Or I would have seen it. Oh God forbid if I'm in the Uber or in the ride, on the ride to the conference location, and I drive by and see it In-N-Out, I'll be stop that car. But anyway, Beans is going to get some In-N-Out. Hopefully, if everything works out. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But the only foreseeable thing that I could see that might put a kibosh on my plans is this Mount Spurs erupts. If you guys have been keeping an eye on the news, I'm sure you've seen something about it. Mount Spurs, a volcano. It's far enough away from like my wife and I are not going to be running away from lava coming down from a mountain. The problem with a volcano erupting will be the ash that it puts up in the air. I mean, it's like 80 miles away from us. Uh, it's like across the water from us on the other side, from the Kenai Peninsula. It's not like next door to us. But if it throws the ash up in the air, that can be problematic. I was here in 2009 when was it Redoubt exploded or erupted, and that caused a lot of problems with the ash and stuff. Maybe I'll do an episode on volcanoes in Alaska. In fact, I think I had a guy reach out to me one time. I worked at one of the volcano institutes. But that's the only thing that I could really see that might be like, oh yeah, Beans is going to travel. Stuff. The way my luck goes, sometimes that's it wouldn't surprise me. But anyway, when this episode comes out, which it should be dropping uh, on Friday, if you listen to this on the day it drops, I'm going to be in Anchorage, hopefully, hanging out with Chook. We're going to go on a little adventure, Chook from Chook Outdoor. We're going to go on a little adventure on Friday. And then Saturday, we're hitting up the Arctic Comic Con. And I might try and get some video of that and make a video of it. I know the last couple of times I've gone, I've just kind of went as just to enjoy myself. I might try and get some footage and do a little video. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. If you're listening to this and you're going to be at Arctic Comic Con and you recognize Chook or I, come up to us, say hi, introduce yourselves, and I might have an Alasquatch sticker for you. Maybe. We'll see. If I can remember to bring them. But anyway, I'll try to remind Chook to bring some stickers or some swag too. It's hard for us to get me anyway, to get used to the idea that someone might like recognize me out in public. And I don't know. Whenever I go back home, people like my family and people introduce me like, he's been on TV, he's famous. I'm like, I'm not famous at all. I pay for way too many of my own drinks to be considered famous. But anyway, getting back to it, today we're talking about the Mandela Effect. And what is the Mandela Effect, you might ask? Well, it's a phenomenon. It was first named by a lady named Fiona Broome when she realized that a lot of people, well, they shared this memory of Nelson Mandela dying in prison. And in reality, at least in this reality, Nelson Mandela survived his prison sentence and he was elected as the first president of South Africa. And I don't have a vivid memory of Nelson Mandela and how he died or when he died. I was too young to really follow global politics at the time that those shenanigans were taking place. But it turns out there's a lot of events out there that lots of people seem to share a memory of, like a movie line or a celebrity's death or a product logo, as well as many other events that have happened or drastically different from how they actually happened. And I could sit here and list off like dozens of Mandela effects, but there's a few that have kind of affected me personally, and those are the ones that um, I really want to talk about. These are the ones that have kind of like messed with my head, I'll say, for lack of a better word. So let's get into those and talk about those. And the first one is it's probably the weakest in my opinion of the ones that have affected me. I'll admit it's affected me somewhat, but it's probably the one that's affected me the least amount. And that's the Bernstein Bears ones. And the Mandela effect around the Bernstein Bears revolves around the name of the series of books, the Bernstein Bears. And most people, myself included, or I will say a lot of people, remember the name of the books to be the Baron Stein, like Frankenstein, Stein. But apparently they were named the Berenstain, Stain Bears. And it's always been that way, apparently, this whole time. And when I started doing research for this episode, I went to Google, and when I to Google the bears, and I literally typed in Berenstain Bears because that's how I remembered it being spelled. And the first thing that popped up was Berenstain Bears Mandela Effect. So take that for whatever it's worth. I mean, like I said, that's what I thought their name was. And when I went to like research them for the podcast, I just automatically typed in Berenstain. And like I said, it doesn't really affect me as much as the others we're going to talk about. And that's because I was pretty young. I had some of the books, and I'm sure I probably checked some of their books out from the library that was across the street from where I grew up. But I always thought it was Stein. I never noticed it was Stain until I saw it brought up and discussed about the Mandela effect. And I have some vague memories of my parents pronouncing it Stain, but it was always spelled Stein. Does that make any sense? Like Froderick and Young Frankenstein correcting everybody. I thought that it was pronounced Berenstain, but spelled Stein. And that's just kind of how I remember it growing up. Um, However, I said this one doesn't affect me that much because one, I don't have a super vivid memory of the name of the books. And two, I grew up in the South. I was born in Kentucky, and a lot of Southern people, they just kind of do their own thing when it comes to pronunciation. So I could just totally see my parents just like looking at it and be like, I don't know, it's Berenstain when it was Stein, spelled Stein. So I'm just going to chalk this one up to a shrug and say, who knows? I was too young to have super vivid memories of the spelling and the pronunciations. And like I said, I actually remember it being spoken as Berenstain, but spelled Berenstein. So we'll just have to leave this one where it is and move on to the next one, which is a little bit more mind bending. So I've briefly spoken about this one on TikTok. Um, and number two on my list of Mandela effects that have affected me personally is the Shazam movie. And I'm not talking about Shazam with Zachary Levi that just came out here a few years ago. I'm talking about the 1990s one that allegedly starred Sinbad as a genie, and it was spelled Shazam, Shazam. And I mean, here's the thing, guys. Like, look, you see those books back there on that bookshelf, on the top shelf there, and over here on these shelves. I mean, those are comic books. I've got comic book figures. There's like 3 Batman over here on this shelf and a Daredevil, and there's more over there in the corner. Uh, I am, or at least I was, a huge comic book nerd. I was into comic books before it was cool. Before it was cool to like comics. Before the Big Bang Theory or the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I was into comics before a lot of you younger viewers were probably even born. Um, I probably learned to read with comic books, or at least they contributed me to be able to read at a higher level than my peers during grade school. I was reading Dracula and Stephen King books when I was probably like way too young to be reading them. Uh, and I think a lot of that was probably due to my love of comic books and my interest in comic books and just my early exposures to them. And that being said, back in the day, well, when I was coming up, there was pretty much just 2 major comic publishers. There was Marvel and DC. I knew this. I knew the differences between the two, and I knew which characters belonged to which company. I knew that Superman wasn't going to be showing up in a Spider-Man comic book. I did know that there were, occasionally company crossovers, but those were super rare. I had, or I guess I still have it, but it's not as good as it used to be. Almost encyclopedic knowledge of characters, powers, names, alter egos, and I kind of still do, but I don't really seriously read comics anymore or collect comics. So I'm a little behind on some of the changes and some of the characters that have endured. For example, we were watching the new Venom movie the other night, and the main bad guy, the Null, my wife was asking about him, and I was like, I don't know who he is. Just what they've shown us in the movie. I've never read a book that he was in. Uh, However, the 90s, the 1990s were my prime collecting time. I was on it, man. Uh, I was craving any kind of new comic book or comic book media, and I knew if a new Batman movie or superhero movie was coming out, I was all over it. And here's where our Mandela effect comes in, because I remember distinctly watching a trailer for a movie called Shazam with 2 A's, with Sinbad as a genie. And I remember having the very distinct thought, somebody is going to get sued. And I knew that Shazam was a DC Comics title featuring Captain Marvel. It gets a little confusing here. See, Shazam's name The name of the guy with the lightning bolt and the cape, his name is Captain Marvel. And he says Shazam. Billy Batson says Shazam, turns into Captain Marvel. But Marvel Comics also has a character named Captain Marvel, who was initially a man, but now in the MCU is a woman, Carol Danvers. And over the years, DC has shied away from the name Captain Marvel, and they've basically let Marvel kind of have it. I'm sure there was probably some lawsuits or something involved. I don't remember the entire debacle, but basically they've shied away from the name Captain Marvel, let Marvel have it, and have just started taking to calling him Shazam, like in the movies, in the new comics. But back in the 90s, he was appearing in a book with some amazing covers by Jerry Ordway called Power Shazam. And I heard about this movie and I honed right in on the name of the movie being not good. I thought that it was, even though it was spelled different, that it was likely to cause legal problems for whoever was putting the movie out. And I remember seeing the trailer once or twice, probably on like a rented VHS tape from the video store, but I never saw the movie itself. I know there's some people out there that claim to have seen the whole movie. I never saw the movie. I just saw the trailer. And after some time went by, I never saw the movie in the theater or on video. And I just kind of assumed that the legal problems I had predicted had caused the movie to never be released, and it was probably shelved somewhere. And keep in mind, this was the 90s, and it's not like it is today where they could just overdub the name and change the title. I mean, I imagine it was probably a bigger undertaking to do something like that back then as it would be today. And the most common, like, debunking that you hear for this Mandela effect is people are confusing this movie with the movie Kazam, starring Shaquille O'Neal, which I understand. However, keep in mind, this is the 90s, and a lot of 90s movies had plot clones. Like there were several movies that came out in the mid and not late 90s that were basically like the same movie, but different. It was the same, but different. Like Armageddon and Deep Impact, Dante's Peak and Volcano, Leviathan and the Abyss, Gordy and was it Babe, I think, or Pig in the City. I see. I'm getting those two movies confused, but I could name more. But you get the point. Like, there's a lot of movies that came out back then that were basically the same movie, but just packaged a little differently. And I think it's a very good chance that Shazam and Kazam could have existed at the same time and been similar movies with different plots. Um, and this is what gets me about this Mandela effect, unlike the Bernstein Bears one, where I remember having the books, but I don't really have any strong thoughts on the title, just kind of some vague memories. And I don't have any like super distinct move. I wouldn't like sit down and write down the Bernstein Bears name. I have a distinct memory of having like a mental dialogue with myself about this movie. Like, I spent some time thinking about this. Like, was the name going to be okay? Are they going to get sued? Will the two extra A's like keep it out of like legal trouble? Did it start out as a comic book Was it going to be a like Captain Marvel Shazam movie? And it like morphed into this genie story because like Hollywood will get their hands on something and just completely like it's supposed to be like one movie and it just turns into something completely different. Like, for example, Good Will Hunting was supposed to end up being like a spy thriller type movie, and now you see the movie that it turned into. Um, so I put a lot of thought into this Shazam movie that just doesn't exist. So why do I and so many other people remember it if it doesn't exist and never existed? And when I found out that this Shazam movie didn't exist, like, it threw me for a mental loop. Like I said, this isn't something that I have like fuzzy memories about from when I was really young. Like, This happened in the heyday of my comics collecting, and I was very much in tune with like the names and the characters and the companies and the published comic books. And there's no way that I would confuse Kazam with Shazam. Uh, I'm certain that I saw a trailer for that movie with Sinbad as a genie called Shazam. All right, so this next one that we're going to talk about, as far as I know, it's kind of relatively newly discovered. I think it's kind of a newer uh, Mandela effect that people have kind of figured out. And I'm kind of hoping that some of you haven't heard about this one yet. So I can be the one that tells you about it and blow your freaking mind. Um, so in the James Bond movie, Moonraker, with Roger Moore as James Bond, there's a character named Jaws, played by Richard Kiel, Kiel, not Keel, and he's this really big guy with metal teeth. Jaws is kind of like a recurring henchman in some of the Roger Moore Bond movies, and in Moonraker, he kind of has like a redemption arc, and part of that arc is Jaws finds a girlfriend, and the girl that Jaws falls in love with is named Dolly. And if any of you have seen this movie, I'm sure you're picturing a scene where Dolly and Jaws are kind of facing each other, and Jaws smiles and exposes his metal teeth, and then Dolly smiles back and exposes a mouthful of braces, and the music like swells, and the two fall in love. And guess what? That shit never happened. Okay? It did happen, but Dolly didn't have braces. She never had braces. She has white, nice, straight teeth, straighter than mine, wider than mine too, probably. And out of all the Mandela effects that I've ever heard or heard of, this one threw me for the biggest loop. Um, if someone held a pew pew to my head and asked me if Jaws' girlfriend in Moonraker had braces, I would have said yes. And if I was on a game show and somebody asked me for any amount of money, millions of dollars, I would have said she 100% had braces. Like that was the gag. And according to the movie, she doesn't have braces. So when I first heard this, I kind of chalked it up to there being a different version of the movie out there. Um, I'm too young to have seen Moonraker in the theater, so I watched it many times on cable on those TBS Bond marathons they used to run, and I've seen it a few times. And I kind of always assumed there was probably a version, like a director's cut or a theatrical version or something, that had Dolly with no braces. Uh, but according to the people involved in the making of the film and the Bond historians, Dolly never had braces. So I actually, here recently, when I discovered this, I had the pleasure of introducing this Mandela effect to my wife. And I remember asking her, I was like, hey, you remember the movie? And I said, remember Jaws' girlfriend? I said, do you remember if she had braces or not? And she's like, oh, of course she did. That's why the scene when they smile at each other, she's like, that's why it worked so well. It was so good. And like me, her mind was freaking blown when I told her that Dolly didn't have braces. And this Mandela effect is a little bit more perplexing to me because it seems to be a bit more like widespread. There are a lot of people that remember her with braces. I think this one's probably a little bit more out there, like Bernstein Bears. There's, like I said, there's a lot of people that remember, like almost everybody remembers it as Bernstein. Like I think this is probably even more, like if you poll people, like there'll be more people that say she has braces than that she didn't have braces. And so far, like the most rational explanation for this Mandela effect that I've seen is apparently several years ago there was a commercial. It wasn't shown in America. It's not an American commercial. Where the actor that played Jaws, he's in a grocery store, and the clerk helping him like smiles at him, and she has braces. And people are saying that this commercial is causing people to misremember the scene in Moonraker, and basically conflate the two. And this is my opinion. I think that commercial is a spoof of that scene. If anything, it seems to me that commercial confirms at one point this scene happened. And it seems weird to me a commercial out there without that scene basically to spoof or to play off of. And I really this one, guys. I know that lady had braces in that scene. Uh, I've seen people on YouTube Moonraker like VHS tapes, like unseal them and play the movie, play that scene, and she doesn't have braces. It never happened. Um, and if it wasn't for like the actors and the director and the people involved in the production saying she never had braces, I would just 100% chalk this up to there being an alternate version of the film or something. But now that we've covered those, I want to mention a couple of like honorable mention Mandela effects I want to talk about briefly. And then we're going to get into some possible reasons and explanations of the Mandela effect and kind of do like a dive into why we have these memories. So let's get into that. So the first honorable mention is a pretty common one that most people have heard about is the Fruit of the Loom logo. Apparently, some people remember the Fruit of the Loom logo having a cornucopia on it. I don't have any strong, reliable memories of this, but I do seem to remember there being a very similar logo with the cornucopia on it. Uh, but I might also be remembering like the Thanksgiving decorations at school. Like, remember they would like put those like cardboard decorations up, and there was always basically the Fruit of the Loom logo with the cornucopia. And I think I remember like maybe some kids saying like that's on my underwear or something. I don't know. Like I said, my memories on that are pretty hazy. Um, the second honorable mention is Scary Movie 2. There's a character in the movie played by Chris Elliott named Hanson, and Hanson has like a deformed, misshapen hand, which is the butt of several jokes and scenes in the movie. In one scene, he's like preparing food and he's like mixing the mashed potato with his deformed hand. And in another scene, which is like the basis for this Mandela effect, there's a character dangling off the side of a building, and Hanson like reaches out to save him with the deformed hand, and he says in this like comically high voice, I don't know if I can do it because I'm sick. He goes, "Take my strong hand," and the person like dangling off the building like recoils and like falls to And I remember this because me and some of my buddies on the police force had this running joke about "take my strong hand," and we would quote it like back and forth to each other. But apparently, this was never in the movie, and I I believe some internet sleuths have found the line in one of the trailers for the movie, and that I think might be the root of the confusion there. Um, that I think is probably a legit explanation. Like, I don't necessarily think that's a Mandela effect. Side note, there is a great line in the Uncharted movie that is not in the movie, it's in the trailer. And I was so disappointed in the movie theater when that scene came up. It's the scene where I almost called him Tobey Maguire. Tom, what's his name? Who's Spider-Man? What's his name? Tom Holland. He's um he's doing something like a junction box or a fuse box, and he closes the box, and like one of the henchmen is standing there, and he's like an Irish guy or a Scottish guy, and he goes, "Hey, you know, you're supposed to be here, like, howdy," and he says it all like jabbered, you know, like he can't understand him. And Tom Holland just looks at him and goes, What? I don't know why, but I thought that was so funny. And then when it happens in the movie, that doesn't happen. And I was super disappointed. So, anyway, there you go, folks. There's my two honorable mentions. Uh, and now we're going to get into some really deep stuff here and talk about why people are experiencing Mandela effects. And we're gonna go down the rabbit hole here. So, you know, get a glass of milk and curl up with some cookies because we're gonna be doing some deep thinking on this. Okay, so look, I'll be the first person to admit that human memory is unreliable. Okay, it's flawed. I saw it all the time working as a police officer, and most cops will tell you that eyewitness testimony is not the holy grail that people tell you it is. You hear this all the time in cryptid investigations on cryptid shows and stuff like that, where people were like, you know, these witnesses saw that, you know, that's what they saw, that's what they said they saw. And, you know, like I said, I wasn't there. I'm not going to say they didn't see what they said they saw, but at the same time, I cannot count the number of times there would be a hit and run accident and there would be multiple witnesses, and every single one would give you the different color and description of the suspect vehicle. And when we eventually tracked down the vehicle, it would turn out that like one of the witnesses was right and the rest were kind of close. And then maybe there was one that was like way the hell off. So it's easy for me to admit that the Bernstein Bears Mandela effect and the honorable mentions are probably just like faulty memories. Like I'm like, yeah, I'm probably just remembering it wrong. I just probably don't get it. Um, However, it's harder for me to accept the things like the Shazam and the Moonraker Mandela effects. Um, I have opinions and thoughts on those. You know, I spent time thinking about them and laughing at them and had time invested in them. And it's hard for me to accept that maybe I'm not remembering them right. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. So if you go to the Mandela Effect Reddit thread, which I strongly recommend you don't. I mean, it's literally just people posting things about Mandela effects and then just masses and masses people saying, nope, you're remembering it wrong. There's no such thing. It's just a faulty memory. Which don't get me started on why people who don't believe in something are spending their time in a message board about a subject. I think most of them are just people that have like this mighty need to be right and prove somebody wrong. So it's like their self-given divine mission to produce evidence that people are wrong and showing news and photos saying, see, it's always been this way, which isn't the entire point of the Mandela effect that people remember it one way, but it's different in reality now. So by its very nature, it's impossible to prove that it changed if the only thing we have to go on is our memories. Um, so I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say that some Mandela effects are indeed faulty memories. Just like I think a lot of cryptid sightings or Bigfoot sightings are probably misidentifications or just straight up misunderstandings. Uh, Possibly caused by like April Fool's headlines or just plain like bad jokes. You guys remember a few years ago there were rumors, like pretty persistent rumors, going around that Eddie Murphy was dead. Um, So, like, when Eddie Murphy really does pass away, I bet there's going to be a lot of people saying, like, wait, didn't he die like years ago? I went through the exact same thing when Richard Simmons died here pretty recently. I was like, I thought he died back in like 2016 or something. Like, I, those kind of things, those rumors might be like seeds for future Mandela effects being, planted now. It's like, I saw on the internet years ago that so and so died or something like that. So anyway, I'm conceding to the redditors that yeah, some Mandela effects are faulty memories. But let's say like with cryptids or Bigfoot sightings, um, all it takes is one that's not a misremembering. Let's say not all the Mandela effects are faulty memories. So let's go into some of the theories. Uh, some of the more extreme explanations for the Mandela effects. The number one on my list here. Excuse me. Remember, I'm sick. Give me something. Give me a break. Is time travel, and somebody went back in time, and maybe they were trying to be really careful, but somehow through like the butterfly effect, they caused some tiny ripples that spread throughout time. Like the guy that designed the Fruit of the Loom logo was on his way to the office with his sketches, and the time traveler bumped into him, and he spilled some coffee on one of the sketches, and nobody was hurt, no harm, no foul. But the sketch was stained, making it less desirable to the people making the final decision on the logo. And now we are in a cornucopia-less universe. There's no logo, no cornucopia on the logo. So it's kind of weird how a lot of movies and stuff like that would be affected by just like one one single event. So it's probably like either multiple time travelers, or maybe they're doing that as some kind of signal. They're like, all right, we're going to see if this works. I'm going to go back, and this is going to be my goal to change this movie or change this like logo, and you'll know if it worked if the logo changes. I don't know. Number two is the multiverse theory. This one's a little bit easier to explain now that multiverse has kind of been made like mainstream in movies. Uh, Comic books have been using like multiverse and multiverse storylines for years and years. Um, and it's always been kind of hard to explain to people that weren't really into like sci-fi fantasy, but now it's a little bit more mainstream. And basically, there's like infinite number of universes, and every time you make a choice, there's a split where one of you makes one choice and the other one where something else happens. So if I'm standing here and I flip a coin and it comes up heads and we all see heads, so we're in the heads universe. But when I flipped the coin, there was a split, and somewhere out there in the multiverse, there's a version of us where the coin comes up heads and we all see heads and we're or tails. I'm sorry, tails, and we're in the tails universe. So there's a heads universe and a tails universe, and things go on from that point on, from that decision point on. But the question is like, how do some of us have memories from different universes? Like where Dolly does have braces. Are those memories like bleeding over? Or are these from an alternate universe where maybe we passed away and when we died, we're now in this universe? We came into ourselves in this universe where she doesn't have braces. Um, if you've ever watched Rick and Morty, there's a point in the show where they have to go find a new universe to live in. So they find one that's exactly like their old one, only except people say, instead of saying Parmesan cheese, they say Parmesan. So it's kind of like that. It's like, okay, well, everything's exactly the same, except in Moonraker, Dolly doesn't have braces, or the cornucopia logo doesn't exist here. The third explanation is simulation theory, which is kind of basically like we're all living in the Matrix, and kind of like in the movies, the Matrix has gone through several versions, and it's possible that the Mandela effects are just residual programming from like previous versions. And this theory would actually go kind of a long way into uh, explaining things like past lives. Like when somebody remembers a past life, it's likely a part that some of their memory or RAM that was used to create that past life is now making up you. And it could be like bugs in the Matrix, like we had to reboot and install this update now. So now Hansen doesn't say, take my strong hand, but it's such a minor change, it's not worth fixing. So we're just keep it running. Um, and the most like recent one that I've heard that I've come across is it's a conspiracy, which I guess everything's a conspiracy now. And I've heard usually most people lean toward like some kind of multiverse or matrix theory, but I've seen a lot of people just say, "Oh no, the Mandela effect is just plain old gaslighting from them, from whoever's in charge, to see how much they can get away with changing before people notice." Uh, and you guys know if you listen to the show regularly, like I'm not a huge conspiracy guy. I absolutely believe there are conspiracies, but not everything is a conspiracy. And in my opinion, uh, people stop using conspiracies as theories and start using them as excuses. Like, I didn't get the new job I wanted because the lizard people don't like me. Uh, Plus, I don't think anyone exerts enough control to rustle up every single VHS copy of Moonraker in existence and change it. I just don't like why. That's not that's not worth exerting the effort over just to see if they notice. Let's see how much we can get away with here. Let's see if we can rustle up and replace every VHS copy of Moonraker in existence. Um, going over some of those explanations, I'm hoping I'm just remembering shit wrong. Uh, I'll take a faulty memory over living in the Matrix or in the stream of multiverses any day. Although if I could like pull some Neo shit in the Matrix, I could probably go for that. But I'm not the one, and you probably aren't either. So I think the Mandela effect is a lot like other paranormal type encounters, like some Bigfoots are mixed misidentifications and faulty memories, seeing one thing and confusing it for another. However, I don't think all Mandela effects are faulty memories. I think there's something to it. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is. It's really scary to think about something or someone is able to manipulate reality in such a way. I think that's why we have so many naysayers out there shouting at the heavens that all Mandela effects are nothing but confabulations and misrememberings because they're scared, and they're probably rightfully scared because that's a terrifying truth um, to have to contend with. So I wish I could tell you guys that I knew what was going on, but I can't. Hopefully, listening to this, you'll be a bit more aware of changes in your reality, and who knows, maybe one of these days we'll jump into a reality where Bigfoot is a fact of life and he's been known about for years. And maybe there's some positives to this multiverse thing. I don't know. But anyway, thanks for hanging out and watching and listening for this long, especially with my congestion I've got going on. Hopefully, I feel better for my trip next weekend. So, if you like the show, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. You can go to my website, lasquatchpodcast.com. I've got a little store in there. You can pick up some stuff. You can pick up the books I've written. I've got one of them setting up over here. And I'll sign it for you if you order it from the website. If not, if you're not into that kind of thing, you can order it directly from Amazon. But anyway, guys, thanks for hanging out with me. If you didn't like the podcast, please send all complaints to chukesoutdoors@outlook.com and let me know what you didn't like. Until next time, beans abides.